Peace, what's going on? Have you ever wanted to get involved in real estate wholesaling but just didn't know how? Well, my good friend Chris Jefferson has a whole course that he offers that teaches you all the ins and outs of real estate wholesaling. Look below in the show notes, you'll see a link that you can click on where you can get more information about the courses in which he offers. Showing you how to get started in real estate wholesaling, how to get leads, how to promote yourself online. So definitely look below in the show notes, click on the link, get more information, and learn how to build your business. All right? Take care. Peace.
In 2010, before I started making a lot of money, where, I believe you start to feel these energy shifts in your life.
Mhm.
And although I wasn't making money yet, I could feel energy shifting. And
Okay.
that's likely what people like you and other people were seeing is the energy in my life was starting to shift.
Right.
And I was starting to pick up some momentum. And, the thing about momentum is you got to also get behind it and push it.
Right.
You can't just kind of let it go by itself. And so quitting the job was just me getting behind my own momentum
Right.
and really starting to give it a strong push. And, probably less than 12 months later, man, things were just rolling for me really, really crazy.
Malik's First Job Podcast, here to answer any questions that y'all ask. Financial literacy and resources. Parents and young people becoming bosses. CEOs, future leaders, entrepreneurs. Conferences and boardrooms getting sponsors secured. If you want generational wealth, Brooklyn's own Kerwin Phillip with information to help. Malik's First Job Podcast. Malik's Podcast. Brooklyn's own Kerwin Phillip. Kerwin Phillip. Malik's First Job Podcast. Podcast. Brooklyn's own Kerwin Phillip. Generational wealth.
Peace, everybody. How you doing? This is Kerwin Phillip with another episode of the Malik's First Job Podcast, where we discuss topics surrounding leadership, entrepreneurship, and financial literacy for parents and teens. Today, I got an extra special guest today. I got real estate investor Chris Jefferson. All right, he's going to share with you about his experience in real estate and a whole wealth of other topics within that area. Hey, Chris, man, what's going on, man? It's been a minute.
Nah, for sure, for sure. What's up, man? I'm happy to be here, man. Excited to talk with you, man, and kind of share the story a little bit.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So, for people who are not familiar with you, tell them exactly who is Chris Jefferson.
Yeah, it's a great question, man. I'm an investor, an educator. I'm a student. I'm been in real estate, man, for 12 years now. Around 10 years full time. I got into real estate using a strategy where you can get started with kind of very little money. It doesn't matter what your credit score is, what your background is. I was able to kind of find out about this strategy. I started to implement it, and from there, man, I went on to start building houses, fixing and flipping houses, buying apartment complexes, kind of doing a lot of different things. And how I started, is what I teach people how to do now. And so when I say educator, I run a program called the Charged Up University. We've had a little over 2,000 students in the past 2 years that we've been able to teach, how to get involved in real estate investing with very little money and how
Okay.
they can make, a really great income.
Okay. So, who introduced you to the whole to real estate? How did you just come across it?
Yeah, man. So, when I graduated high school, I wasn't going to college, wasn't really kind of sure what I was going to do at the time. And a girl that I was dating, her mother had retired in her early 40s
Hmm.
through real estate investing with rental property. Her and I were having a conversation, and she asked me what I wanted to do. I said I wanted to do real estate. So she introduced me to somebody in town who owned a mortgage company,
Okay.
and I found out about real estate, or the opportunity, I guess, of real estate kind of through her. And then it was just kind of just being resourceful I call it being resourceful and forceful. I mean, sometimes you got to force your way into an opportunity. And so, I started reaching out to anybody that I could find that was a real estate investor, asking them for help, asking for assistance and learning. And one day I was leaving church. I saw a sign that said, "We buy houses cash." I called the sign, had a conversation with the guy that answered the phone, told him that I was willing to work for free and wanted to learn how to do real estate. And things just kind of quickly started progressing from there.
Okay. Okay. So when you first started, I guess when you started working with this gentleman, like what did he teach you initially?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. So, that first kind of interaction, he kind of taught me about the concept, I guess, of wholesaling itself, which is if, somebody owns a property and they're willing to sell it for, let's just say $50,000, but that property might be worth in the current condition, potentially $70,000. So you put a contract on the property and then you go find somebody that's willing to pay 70,000 for it. You make 20,000. So, you know, what I would like to say is what he taught me is that it was possible. Sometimes you just need somebody to expose you to a concept to realize that something is actually, doable. So, he kind of exposed me to the business itself. I used to kind of run around and find addresses for him and kind of find properties for him, not wholesale to him, but just find deals for him. And then I started to recognize I had a skill set talking to people, making deals. And so I kind of went and started kind of trying to figure out how to branch off of my own.
okay. Okay. And I've heard this term wholesaling, thrown around quite a bit, within the real estate field. Can you kind of dig a little bit deeper on how that works?
Yeah, sure. So wholesaling is a really interesting concept, right? What wholesaling gives you the ability to be able to do is, again, find somebody that what we would call or consider in distress. Maybe they're behind on their taxes for their property. Maybe they have code violations currently against the property. Maybe they've had their water shut off, and maybe you're behind on, bills, pre-foreclosure, just different types of distress. And so what we're doing is we're reaching out to those people and we're essentially offering them solutions. A lot of people in those scenarios are going to have properties that they own that aren't in great condition. Maybe they're dealing with problematic tenants. So we're going to come in and we're going to work out an agreement with them to purchase the property for X amount of dollars. And so once we kind of formulate that agreement, we do a real estate purchase contract, and the contract has what's called assignable rights. And so, what assignable rights are is they give you the right to be able to sell that contract for a monetary value. Okay.
Okay.
And so you're going to then go find what we would call a cash buyer. And there's resources to be able to do that. Like a great resource is called Cash Buyer Data Feed, for example. So you can go on Cash Buyer Data Feed and you can buy a list for very little money of, let's just say everybody in Richmond, Virginia that's bought a property in cash. And so, those are people purchasing investment properties. Once you have that information, you can then go market to those people your deal that you have under contract and then kind of see if they're willing to purchase that property from you.
Oh, wow. Wow. So you're pretty much like the middle person in the deal.
Exactly. There you go. Yeah. So you're playing the middle, right? You're playing the middle and kind of connecting the dots
Okay.
and creating opportunities.
Okay. So in order to do that, to be a wholesaler, like what kind of license or credentials do you need to be that middle person?
Yeah, so like when it comes to real estate, or wholesaling rather, the beautiful part about it is you don't need a license at all. I've never held a real estate license. I've done, millions of dollars of business, sold millions and millions of dollars of property. Never had a real estate license at all because you're not being an agent. You're contracting property for investment, and then you're using the ability to assign the rights of that contract, right? So, you see it in different businesses. Real estate just kind of makes it an interesting strategy, but it's something that we see in different businesses all the time,
Right.
where maybe you get a mortgage with one company and that mortgage gets assigned or sold right over to another lender, who then starts to service that debt. Doesn't change anything for you, but there's business that has taken place kind of in between that.
Okay. Okay. All right, great. So outside of just wholesaling, what other aspects of real estate are you involved in?
Yeah, man. So, in 20, I think 2012, 2013,
Okay.
I built my first house. And, how that kind of came about was I purchased a property to flip it.
Okay.
And it was in Churchill here in Richmond. Kind of made the mistake of buying it without looking at it, which is something I tend to do sometimes if the numbers make sense. And the
Right.
house looked fine on the exterior. We open up the door, the house is essentially caving in.
Oh wow.
And so, we took a look at it and it was like, hey, like, can this property be saved or not? And my contractor at the time made the suggestion that we tear the house down and build a brand new house. And so I had no building experience at the time whatsoever. I had flipped, probably 50, 60 properties at that point.
Wow.
But, had not done anything extensive as building a brand new house. And so I found a local builder, a guy named Ricky Scott, great guy. So I found Ricky Scott through a referral, and I took him to lunch. We had never met before.
Okay.
Told him I was interested in building houses. I put out my checkbook, and I told him that I was willing to cut him a check if he was willing to teach me how to build houses. And he
Wow.
was kind of taken back. And then he ended up next day calling me and said, "Hey, I'll do it for X amount of dollars." I did that. He taught me how to build houses. So that was the first time that I, built a house from the ground up.
Okay.
Done a ton of fix and flips, historical projects. Right now, for example, if you're familiar, I'm sure with like the old Armstrong High School site.
Okay.
So we're involved with, new construction, 36 houses there, where we did all the site work, the floor plans, interior designs, the exterior designs, things of that nature.
Okay.
We've done a lot in the kind of the new construction field. In 2017, I bought my first apartment complex, also in Churchill, 23 unit complex up there. That property, for example, we bought it for I think 1.3 million, put about a million in it. So that's been a great cash flowing asset. And then I do a lot of different things, man. Like one thing that I really like that I do now is we create mortgages for people. So, we'll purchase a
Okay.
property, and instead of renting that property out, what we'll actually do is we'll create a mortgage. And so it gives somebody the opportunity of home ownership that generally would not be able to qualify for a traditional mortgage at like a Wells Fargo or, something of that nature. And so we're able to do things like that, which I really enjoy doing. So, kind of
Okay.
touched a lot of different parts of real estate, but by far, my favorite aspect of real estate is wholesaling for sure.
Okay. So let's talk about the piece where I guess you provide mortgages for other people. Like, are you partnered with a bank to be able to provide that resource?
Yes, that's an interesting question, man. So, I use banks on some of my deals, but
Okay.
more primarily, what I use is what we call private money or hard money.
Okay.
So, they have what are called hard money lenders. They kind of really gives you the ability to, um, get stuff at a really strong discount. And
Okay.
so, I really enjoy kind of finding, lenders that kind of specialize in that. They have an understanding of the business, the type of projects we're doing,
Right.
what the projects take. So the financing, surprisingly, man, I know a holdup for a lot of people when they think investment, they think real estate, they think that it's a large investment and that finding the money or getting the money is difficult.
Right.
Ironically, that's probably one of the easiest things to do is find the money to be able to invest in real estate. It's just not common knowledge. But
Okay.
there's, like here in Richmond, man, there's probably at least 10 companies that are what we would call a hard money company that will
Okay.
lend you money for investment purposes, regardless of your credit, regardless of it's no background check or anything like that. It's a real estate asset based loan.
Right.
And so, that's how we've been able to, over the years, really kind of catapult and grow and scale the business in a large way.
Wow. So with these hard money lenders, how the like I guess the interest rates in which they charge, are they comparable to what you get with a traditional bank or
No, so
mortgage company?
yeah, no, absolutely not. Right. So,
Okay.
like right now, a bank might charge you 4%. Now, the thing with that is, you've got to have the taxable income to qualify. You got to have the credit score. You got to have all these kind of moving parts. You got to cut through red tape, right, to be able to
Hmm.
get something like that done. Hard money, you're going to see anywhere from 8, 14, sometimes even 20% to
Right.
be able to do, a deal like that. So it's almost essentially like having a deal partner. But in the overall scheme of things, I think the way to really kind of look at that is if you're in a position to qualify for bank financing, then you should definitely use, bank financing.
Mhm.
But if you're not, entertaining and looking at hard money, is definitely something to consider. But most importantly, right, like for me, I haven't used hard money in a few years, but that's how I started out. That's how I was able to really kind of grow my business.
Okay.
Now I use primarily what we would consider private money. So
Okay.
private money is not from somebody who loans money as a business. You essentially raise and source capital from other individuals. So that's kind of what we do now. And so you just have to look at the interest rate as being relative to the risk that somebody has to take to loan you money with little experience, little capital of your own, things of that nature.
Okay. So let's say someone who is interested, I guess, in getting into like flipping and wholesaling and stuff like that. I guess, and they don't have that much saved, they're starting from scratch. They would probably pursue a hard money lender to kind of get them on their feet. Or are there
Yeah. So
any other options?
yeah, so they would, but what I would tell you is this, right? And this is just speaking from 12 years of experience.
Right.
You know, I would recommend sourcing capital from somewhere first.
Okay.
And so what I mean by that is that's why I teach and like wholesaling so much because it gives you the ability to create your own capital. Because although a hard money lender is going to loan you the money, you're still going to have some sort of down payment. All
Right.
right. You're going to need to be able to pay your contractors until you receive what we call a draw. So before you receive a construction draw, that's when you get reimbursed for your expenses. You have to have already spent that money. Well, if it costs you $5,000, $10,000 to get to a draw, you got to be able to have that, five, $10,000, right? And
Right.
so that kind of starts to become, pretty important. Um, but that's kind of how that kind of functions in a nutshell.
Okay. Okay. All right. So now I remember, I guess, we used to work together years ago,
Yeah.
right? Working the call center. And I remember, when I first met you, that, you would come into work and you always had a whole bunch of books in your hand,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Always had books in your hand and, you'd be taking phone calls and in between calls, you'd be sitting there reading, right?
No doubt.
So, so I know that books, and reading and education is very key and vital, to your success. What other elements, I guess, or traits that I guess that led to you being the way you are today?
Yeah, man. It's funny you say that, man. I mean, the reading is definitely important, but it's not the only thing. It's funny, man. Talking about when we worked together in a call center,
Yeah.
I hated those jobs. You know, working in a call center, having to meet different metrics. I
Yeah.
cut my teeth in call centers, man. When I graduated high school, I
Hmm.
was working at FedEx, and when I left FedEx, my first job was, working at a bill collector. You know,
Right.
and what I have learned in hindsight is that the experiences of talking to people on the phone,
Hmm.
confrontational conversations,
Right.
sales to an extent, being able to have, the ability to be quick on your feet
Right.
when being questioned, remaining calm when people become aggressive. All the traits that I got from working in call centers over the years really translated well into what I do now because
Okay.
wholesaling is being able to go or get on the phone or go sit at somebody's kitchen table and have a conversation with them and get them to want to sell you a piece of their property.
Right.
And you have to sometimes deal with combative people. You have to be able to be quick. You have to
Right.
be able to be creative and think of multiple solutions. So I would 110% say that, while I thought that I didn't, you know, enjoy it at that time, it's
Right.
definitely become something that's critical to the success that I've been able to have 110%.
This is up. This is up. So, okay. So, kind of going back to the books, what are like 5 books that you would recommend that people that want to either get into real estate or trying to level up? What would be your 5 recommendations?
Yeah. So look, so when it comes to books, man, I've got an insane amount of books. So I'm not gonna say for real estate. Well, I guess I'll say some for real estate. I'll
Okay.
kind of give you a few books that I think have been really kind of pivotal for me.
Right.
How to Win Friends and Influence People
Okay.
is a really phenomenal book. 48 Laws of Power is a must read, in my opinion.
Right.
48 Laws of Power is an interesting book. Um, I didn't know this until recently, I think like a year ago,
Mm-hmm.
but I was told like 48 Laws of Power is like the number one book in prison. Uh,
Wow.
and, I can see why that's the case. 48 Laws of Power is a book that could be used for good or could be used for evil.
Right.
Uh, if you look at the teachings in it. But I think it's important because part of sales is learning how to move somebody from point A to point B without them realizing you're moving them from point A to point B. You want the
Okay.
person you're selling to feel like it's their own decision, but it has to be done with integrity.
Right.
Rich Dad, Poor Dad is a really good book.
Okay.
Change Your Brain, Change Your Life is a really good book. Um, Never Split the Difference is a really good book. So those would be a couple that I would definitely recommend. Um, that I think are really, really important. Art of War is a really good book.
Right.
So there's a ton, but those are some like kind of foundational books I would say that, because we have to like, even myself, like when I started really kind of doing this and getting into this business,
Right.
just business in general, not even real estate, just business in general, business can be war. And you have to have a strength. You got to kind of have a foundational set of principles. And, I think those books are really strong at kind of helping establish that and kind of giving you an edge when it kind of comes to communicating in the business.
This is up. This is up. So, what advice would you give like your 16-year-old self?
Oh, man. That's crazy, man. So it's actually a good question. Ironically, man, I've done an insane amount of interviews over the years, and
Uh-huh.
nobody's asked me that.
Okay.
Advice I would give my 16-year-old self. Um, I think number one, man, would be to give myself grace. Um,
Okay.
I think that sometimes we operate in spaces of pressure
Mm-hmm.
and wanting things too fast.
Right.
Um, I made my first $1 million at 24 years old. And, the crazy part about that is I remember feeling like it wasn't happening fast enough.
Wow.
And, I shouldn't have felt that way because I was 24 years old. It was really happening, faster than normal.
Okay.
And, I remember that time period in my life. Uh, and I know that if I kind of had a better understanding prior to that, it would kind of really give me a better perspective on how I operated in the business, at
Mm-hmm.
that time. Some other advice that I would give myself is the friends that I have then aren't going to be my friends later. Um,
Okay.
I think for people younger, I'm 35 now. I think for people younger, that can kind of be a hard concept to grasp, right? Like I grew up playing sports.
Right.
You have a ton of friends, you have this camaraderie, these relationships. But I remember when I was in high school, my mom saying like, um, you're only gonna have 5 friends that you're gonna remember from high school, and this, that, and the third. And I'd be like, oh, you're crazy, da 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 da. But that's facts, right? Like
Wow.
the reality of it is your circle kind of continues to get smaller and smaller as you get older and kind
Right.
of refine and gain understanding and how you kind of go about changing and adjusting in your own life. And
Right.
so the advice that I would give myself at that time at 16 was don't place too much value in every single relationship. Understand the difference between friend and acquaintance.
Right.
I think that would have been some really important advice. I'd give myself advice to not make as many bad decisions, man. When I was younger, I didn't make all the best decisions. I got in trouble and different things like that. Um,
Right.
I'm sure you know how it is, man. A lot of stuff you think that's going to matter, you
Yeah.
know, 20,
It
30
don't.
years later, it don't matter at all.
Right.
But that's definitely, kind of a conversation I would have with myself for sure.
Yeah. All right. So this is kind of touch on something that you mentioned earlier that we just can't skip over. You said you made your first $1 million at 24.
Yeah, yeah,
Right. Right now, how did that happen, and what was that feeling like?
yeah. It's crazy, man. So that happened because I started flipping houses, and
Okay.
this was at a time where I don't know if you remember this, but like I think Bush had actually came out with it when he was president, but there was a $6,500, I believe, first time home buyer tax credit.
Okay.
And this is what really kind of started to re-stimulate the economy. When they had all those bailout packages and kind of all that stuff
Okay.
going on. So Obama, when he became president, inherited that and continued it. And I was flipping houses, and we were focused on affordable real estate and first-time homebuyer properties. And man, it was nuts. We couldn't buy and renovate a house fast enough. Um, but I happened to get into the market at a time where because the market had bottomed out with the Great Recession, there was a surplus of inventory available. So if you wanted to go buy 5 houses today, you could go buy 5 houses today. The way the real estate market is now,
Hmm.
it's really hard to go find 5 houses today to buy, you know?
Right.
And so I was able to buy a lot of property. I was able to raise strong capital, using hard money and some networking relationships that I had created. And so that year, I bought and sold around 40 houses or so that year, fixing and flipping.
Okay.
I realized that I could do what we called at the time, we called it an assembly line method. And
Okay.
so essentially, every house we bought, we would make it pretty much the same, right? The siding would be the same. The front door was always red, same exact carpet, same tile from Lowe's. There was,
Right.
it was a production model. There was not like really a creative model. And so we were able to turn out a lot of product. And ironically, I didn't know that I had made $1 million because, when you're running a business, right, the money coming in is also going back out the door to
Right.
be reinvested, to support the current business, whatever the case might be. I knew I was doing really well. But ironically, I still had a job. I was still working at T-Mobile.
Okay.
And I had a couple $100,000 sitting around, but it was still a kind of a new thing. And I went and had a meeting with my accountant that I was using at the time. And,
Hmm.
she said, hey, like, you're killing it. You did this, you did that. And she's like, you did 1.3 this year. And I'm like, what? I'm like, 1. Like, what? I'm like, 1.3. And she's like, yeah, you took home 1.3 million. Now I had reinvested a lot of my money back into my business.
Right.
But that was kind of my first realization that, I really kind of had things rolling in the right direction. And that kind of sounds weird when I say that because I had already done about 40 houses,
Right.
but I was just trying to get this thing moving and make it work so bad
Right.
that I didn't really have a connection at that time to how much money I was making. I was just fighting to try to create an opportunity and a career for myself.
Right. All right. So you said at the time he's working at T-Mobile.
Right. Yeah.
So at what point did you say, you know what, it's time for me to leave the 9 to 5? Like it was me. I'd be like 1.1 million. All right, yo, T-Mobile, I'm out.
So
Right.
here's the thing, man. So, I had a kid and I was paying child support. I was paying
Okay.
$1,200 a month in child support,
Okay.
and which at the time was like, you know, that was like 99% of what I was making.
Right.
That's what it felt like. And so, I had kind of had this mental holdback. And it's funny, man. I challenge people on this same thing now, which is funny. But I had this mental holdback that I couldn't afford to be self-employed
Oh wow.
because I heard that the insurance was high and like all the taxes and all this stuff. And
Right.
I was only making 25,000 a year at T-Mobile, but I had this mental roadblock that I couldn't leave the job. And what I say to people now is, well, do you even know how much the insurance would cost to be self-employed? Like, have you even
Right.
checked? Because I hadn't even checked, right? Like, I hadn't even looked. It was just something I thought because I had heard it.
Right.
And so, one day, well, I had gone to Miami for a friend of mine's bachelor party.
Hmm.
And, I was having a phenomenal time in Miami. and I was sitting on the beach, and I was just like, man, like I gotta go back to work next week, you know.
Right.
And so I flew home. I got to work the next day, and my supervisor had kind of like challenged me on something, and I didn't take it the right way. I didn't appreciate it, and
Right.
so I had a conversation with him. And as I was talking to him, I just started thinking about it, and I was like, I'm like, man, am I really sitting in here listening to this guy? You know,
Right.
and I'm like, I'm over here building something way bigger than this, way bigger than anything that he's doing. You
Right.
know, when you're working at these large institutions, T-Mobile's a huge company. You know, they have systems and processes in place that are intentional about keeping you at that job,
Mm.
right? Your job isn't putting a restaurant in the building, a gym, all this different stuff, a game room, pool tables, PlayStations. They're not
Right.
doing that because they like you.
Right.
That's done to retain you, right? That's done to
Okay.
make sure that you don't leave, right?
Okay.
And so once I kind of started thinking about that while I'm sitting there talking to him, I just told him I was out. I was just like, hey, you know what? I'm tripping, man. I'm like, I've got too much money to even be in this building. And so I just got it
Is
from
that
him
what you said to him?
verbatim. Yeah, verbatim, bro. And I got up from his desk. I walked out the building. I left all my stuff in my desk. Uh, I just walked out. I never went back, man. And you know, sometimes I say I wish I would have done it sooner. Uh,
Mhm.
and I do, but at the same time, I believe that everything happens in the way in which it's supposed to happen.
Right.
And so, I had a lot of maturing that I needed to do even at the time, being
Right.
young. And so, it kind of all worked itself out, man. But yeah, I had
Yeah.
to tell him I was out of there, man. You know.
Peace, peace, peace. What's going on? This is Kerwin Phillip from the Malik's First Job Podcast. Just a quick reminder, hit that subscribe button below and that notification bell. That way you never miss an episode when it drops. All right? Thank you all for supporting, and let's jump back into the conversation. Peace. So you were Antonio Brown before Antonio Brown.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny, man. Exactly. I did make it known because I had to walk by my team
Uh-huh.
as I left, you know.
Right.
And so then my supervisor, she's looking at me like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And I'm like, yo, I'm out. Like I'm
Yeah.
done. I'm out.
Right.
And I'm like dapping people up. I'm saying bye. You know what I mean?
You don't win the championship.
Yeah, I'm like, man, I'm out of here, man. Y'all be good, I'm gone, And so I got out of the building, man. And they kept calling me, trying to get me to come back to work because they had
Uh-huh.
promised me like I was gonna be a supervisor and like all these things. Like again, their job is to retain you.
Right.
My second job was working with you, right? And so
Yeah.
what people because like what you said earlier, like I was always on the phone. I'm trying to make deals. I'm trying to figure stuff out.
Right.
Um, and so what kind of started to happen, man, is that everybody kind of didn't know exactly what I had going on, but everybody could kind of see that, like, all right, he got something he's trying to do though.
Yeah.
And so, for me, man, a lot of people supported me. I felt, a lot of people that were kind of behind that, kind of put their energy behind me and
Right.
kind of encouraged me. And so at some point, man, you got to believe in yourself. That's something thankfully that I haven't ever struggled with. And, shout out to my parents, man. I grew up, my parents told me I could do anything I wanted to.
Right.
And, I just happened to be crazy enough to believe them. And so, you know, my dad told me that every day. Every day he would tell me I could do whatever I wanted. In terms of, when I got older and, different plans and, that kind of thing. And, that kind of really influenced me to kind of get out of that job and, really kind of push through. And I'll
Yeah.
say lastly on that, one thing I say to people now that's a simple concept. It's just not one that we think about when we're going through, these different situations, right? But what somebody said to me or I'm sorry, what I heard somebody say to somebody else before, and around right after I quit my job, and this is just real. Again, like I said, man, I made $25,000 a year.
Hmm.
Somebody said to me, they said, or said to my friend, look, if you could get 40 hours of your life back a week, do you not legitimately think that you could make $25,000 in a year? And and when I heard that, I'm like, that's real, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you have something that you believe in, if you have something that you're seeing is getting traction, like real estate for me, you know, um, it wasn't making me any, before, I'm going back a couple years, but it wasn't making me a ton of money at one point.
Right.
But there was a point in time, like in 2010, before I started making a lot of money, where, I believe you start to feel these energy shifts in your life.
Hmm.
And although I wasn't making money yet, I could feel energy shifting. And
Right.
that's likely what people like you and other people were seeing, is the energy in my life was starting to shift,
Right.
and I was starting to pick up some momentum. And, the thing about momentum is you got to also get behind it and push it.
Right.
You can't just kind of let it go by itself. And so quitting the job was just me getting behind my own momentum
Right.
and really starting to give it a strong push. And, I mean, probably less than 12 months later, man, things were just rolling for me really, really crazy.
Yeah. I guess once you made that decision, it kind of forces you to put that energy into your
Right. Now you
business.
gotta put it to use, right? Because, prior to that, right, you're kind of channeling and bottling a lot of that up. You're at
Yeah.
work, and you're frustrated, or you feel like you're restricted and you
Right.
can't do certain things. So yeah, once you kind of cut loose, I think a common misconception people have that I see a lot is they like, a lot of people think that they quit their job and it gets easier, and that's not true. That's not true. When you quit your job to pursue being an entrepreneur,
Right.
it's a grind, man. It's a push. It takes a considerable amount of energy, effort, wherewithal, patience. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think it's something that anybody should feel encouraged to do.
Right.
But you also got to trust your own timing, also.
Yeah.
Uh, 100%.
Yeah. 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 Because you go from working an 8-hour job to pretty much a 24-hour job. Right.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, the clock is no punch in, punch out. You working. That's
Yep.
24/7.
That's right. That's right. That's right. All right. So now I know that you've done this for quite some time. You've been quite successful in the real estate game. Now you're in the business of teaching others.
Right.
From your experience, can you tell us about your program that you have?
Yeah, man. So it's crazy. Um, I didn't start the program until May of 2020,
Okay.
and it's kind of interesting how that even kind of came to be. Over the years, people would make comments to me, and they would say, "Man, you should teach. You should do content."
Hmm.
They would say kind of stuff like that, and I would always just kind of like, "Nah, man. Like, I actually do real estate. Like, why am I going to go sell somebody a course?
Right.
I'd rather focus on my business." And so I didn't for a really long time, and uh, I ran into a guy. His name's Max. He's
Hmm.
really, really, kind of big in the wholesaling space, real estate space online. He was
Right.
speaking at an event, and he kind of came up to me after the event. We had a conversation, said he wanted to get dinner, and I'm just kind of like, for what? Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
And so we got together that night, and he's like, "Look, man, your voice has power. Why are you not sharing your story and influencing other people?" And even still, I'm like, "Yeah, I'm good, man. Like, that's not really my thing.
Right.
I'm just doing houses, man. Whatever, whatever." And so then a couple months later, I started giving it more thought. I ended up speaking at his annual conference.
Okay.
It's like 1,300 people. I just went on stage. I shared my story. Kind of what things had looked like for me over time and what had made me successful in the business itself.
Hmm.
And I don't know, man. It was weird. I got off stage and finished speaking, and
Yeah.
people were coming up and thanking me and, hugging me. And, this is before COVID. It's a couple months before COVID. Since COVID was lingering, we just didn't know,
Right,
and
right.
this is February 2020. And I got booked to do an interview, and this is fate, right? Like, I got booked to do an interview in Phoenix, Arizona, March of 2020. I think it was March 4th, if I'm not mistaken, 2020. This is the week that they shut the world down. All right. That weekend I got back, the whole thing shut down. They canceled all the NFL games. Everything went dead.
Right.
And while I was out there, I did this interview, and it's like, to put this in perspective, you're a New York guy, right?
Yeah.
To put this in perspective, in wholesaling, this podcast is like going to flex in the late 90s, early 2000s. Like, it's a big deal. Like, if you're up there, like, it's a big deal.
Dropping bombs on it.
Yeah, exactly. So I
Right.
go through this podcast, and afterwards, the guy who's the host, he's like, "Man, you got it. Like, you got something. Like,
Mhm.
you can spit it. Like, you can talk, and you can educate, man. Like, you really need to pursue this."
Right.
And I was just like, I'm like, man, like, now, because now people more influence than me, right?
Right.
Of more financial stature, whatever the case might be, bigger businesses. They're saying, "Hey, why are you, like, you need to be doing this? You have that in you."
Right.
And shortly thereafter, I got back, and or right before that, I'm sorry, right before that, uh, my mom, she's telling me that Al Sharpton is coming to preach at our church.
Okay.
And I'm not a huge Al Sharpton fan. And so I told her I wasn't coming, you know. And I'm like, look, it seems kind of politicized. Like, I'm not really that interested. I think it's great that the church has him coming. It's going to be a great event, but I'm going to sit it out. And it's funny, man. It just happened to be a Saturday.
Mhm.
I usually work on Saturdays, but I just wasn't doing anything. I was sitting at home playing PlayStation,
Right.
that morning. And I'm like, man, I'm like, my mom would probably be happy if I showed up, you know.
Right.
I'm sure you have those moments sometimes you're like, man, like, if I just did this, it'd probably go a long way.
Right.
It ain't that big a deal. So I called her and I said, hey, can I still get in? Like, because they had sold it out. I'm like, hey, can I still get in? She's like, yeah, I'll get you in. And so I got there, and it was like the preacher's preaching and he's talking to you, you know.
Okay.
So like Al Sharpton, I never heard him preach before this, and like, the guy is electric in the pulpit.
Yeah.
And crazy powerful voice, insane storyteller. And he's talking, and he said something that made me put me in tears.
Wow.
And what he said was, he said, the problem with some of us as blacks is that we go out here and we become successful. We go get a nice big house out in the suburbs, and we forget about everybody.
Mm.
The last thing we remember to do is to reach back and go grab somebody else.
Right.
And when he said it, I felt guilty. I felt like I had done just that. I felt like I had gone and become successful. When I reflected on my, life at that time, I had realized how um, uncommon it was for somebody to have the success that I was having that looked like
Right.
me at my age.
Right.
And, I felt a certain sense of guilt when I heard that. And so these little things like that kept happening. I got invited to this dinner with like 13 guys here in town, and they took me to Morton's, and they're like, hey, we want to take you to dinner because you've helped all of us build our businesses and you've influenced our lives and all this stuff. And I'm just like, what the hell? Like, what are y'all talking about?
Right.
And these little signs,
Yeah.
kept coming, and I realized it was something I needed to pursue. And I'm happy I did, man. It's been one of the greatest things I've ever done, if not the greatest thing I've ever done. Because, when you're in business and you're ambitious like I am and want to do all these great things, one of the things that we talk about a lot is legacy and creation of
Yeah.
legacy. And that was something that was important to me. And I thought that looked like legacy through buildings, legacy through development, creating
Right.
communities. And it's not that it's not, but more importantly, my audience, the people that I teach are predominantly African American.
Right.
And I've been able to create a space where I've been able to reach over 2,000 people. I've got students having insane success. Um, I got a student who worked at Walmart and, his first year in wholesaling, he's made like 600,000, quit his job. But there's like, I've got hundreds of those types of stories, and so seeing the type of impact and growth that I've been able to give other people by simply kind of teaching what I've learned and what's been working for me, that's a real good feeling.
That's what's up. That's what's up. So for people that want to plug in, I guess, to your course, I guess we're going to include a link for them to connect with you in the notes, below the podcast. So for people that want to reach out to you, I guess on social media, where can they find you?
Yeah, so I got my Instagram handle, I guess, right here, right?
Okay.
So tap in with me on IG. Feel free to shoot me a message. Kerwin, I know you're gonna have a link that you could post, or
Right.
kind of come check out the membership. The community that I've been able to build is super dope. When I started the product or the what I saw was that almost everybody was kind of selling courses, and I kind of didn't want to sell a course. It is a course, but I wanted to actually build a community, a safe space. Essentially, I wanted to be for people what I needed somebody to be for me when I had first started, in the business. And so I put together a community. Like right now we've got a little over 500 students that are active, and that's growing. And so it's a beautiful thing, man. We've got a women's group. I saw that, and I realized over the years, I used to have a woman who was a business partner. And, I realized that, over time, it kind of was clear to me that women didn't have a safe space in business, for a lot of different reasons, right? So we've got a women's group, we've got a book club. We do a morning meetup call every morning at 8 o'clock in the morning. I've got 11 regional coaches that help support students all across the country as well. So we've been able to put something really cool together, and it's been able to touch and help a lot of people. So yeah, I mean, tap in with me on Instagram. Check out the link that Kerman's going to provide as well, and definitely connect with this man and come check out the U for sure.
And now, why'd you call it the U?
Yo, you got some good questions, man. It's funny, man. People ask me this in private, but nobody's really asked me this before in the interview. I like that.
You hear it here first, exclusive.
Yeah. So this is funny, man. So I'm in the office one night, and I'm with a couple people on my team, and we're talking, and hey, what are we gonna name this thing? Because now we got the idea, and it's like, okay, now we need a name, now we need a domain. And I don't know if you ever had to come up with a name for something like your podcast or whatever. Like you're like, oh, like what do I call this? Does it sound right? You're struggling with this.
Right.
And so we're sitting there, and I'm just like, man, I'm like, what sports team has the dope logo, right? And so I remember, right, because we started writing the names down. I'm like, man, I'm like San Diego Chargers. I kind of like how that looks.
Okay.
Because I kind of like adopted the lightning bolt before that. And I'm like, man, San Diego Chargers. I'm like the Raiders. And we're like naming a couple of names. And then I'm like, nah, that's not it. Like, I don't really like that. And then I'm thinking about the fact that I'm building a community,
Okay.
and I'm like, at this point, I'm driving home, right? I'm driving home. I'm still thinking about this. And I'm like, man, like, who were some killers? Like,
Okay.
what team was it when they pulled up? You knew it was problematic. You knew that they meant business and they was coming to punch you in the mouth, right?
Right.
And when I thought about it, I'm like, man, the U in the 80s, man. I'm like the U in the 80s and 90s, even early 2000s. They were feared, they dominant, like alpha energy. And I started thinking about it, and I was like, man, the U, because it was Charged Up University. And I'm like, we're gonna call it the U. And I just saw it in my head. I'm literally driving. I pulled off on the side of the road. I grabbed a piece of notebook paper out of my book bag.
Right.
And I sketched this logo out.
Okay.
I sent it to my graphics guy, and I'm like, man, can you draw this up?
Mm-hmm.
And he sent me this back the next day. And when I saw it, I'm like, that's it. I'm like,
Wow.
that's it. And we ran with it, and it's been dope, man. I love the logo. I love the vibe, because that's kind of energy that my students and we take as a community.
Mm-hmm.
Is we're just going to be dominant. We want to learn real estate. We want to grow in real estate. We
Right.
want to do business. And even if those doors aren't open for us in certain communities, we're going to kick those doors in. We're going to do business. We're going to do good business. And so, people in the real estate community, because like now I'm like this influencer, which is weird in itself. But like in the real estate, influencer community, like
Right.
people like my group, like they're not nobody to play with. Like we gonna go
Yeah.
hard every time.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, every time I see you like online, I'm like, man, that's Chris who used to sit across the next cubicle
I
from
know
me, you
it's crazy,
know.
bro. It's crazy.
But again, you're just a testimony that no matter where you start from, you can grow into something phenomenal. Like
Yeah,
I
man.
said, again, I could testify. This brother used to come into work with about 2, 3 books in his hand, sit down for a couple hours. He was working part time.
Right.
Come
Yeah,
in, take a
yeah.
couple phone calls, read a couple books, then he was out.
Going. What's funny, man? What's funny? Most people don't know this, but uh, I got fired from that job. You probably remember. I don't know if
Oh
you
yeah.
remember.
Hmm.
Yeah. So I got fired from this job for doing real estate on the side.
Wow.
Uh, and I hadn't really made any money from real estate yet. I needed the part-time job because again, I was paying child support at the time, right? So I
Right.
needed money.
Hmm.
And I remember they called me into this, this little office, and they're like playing the recordings of me trying to, work deals and make deals happen
Oh
on
wow.
on company time. And what I realized then is also kind of what I know now, is that you just got to constantly always be moving your feet, man. You got to constantly always be in
Yeah.
pursuit of knowledge, pursuit of money, pursuit of growth. And for me, man, the books were critical, man. I
Hmm.
didn't like reading. You know, when I was in high school, my dad used to literally like force me and my brother into our rooms, and we had to read for an hour.
Hmm.
And it was annoying at first, but eventually you don't got nothing else in your room. Like you start to actually read.
Right.
And I kind of just became fascinated by I still actively read a lot now. I just became fascinated by how much information I was unaware of.
Right.
And how clear you could learn and get information simply by reading a book. I'm reading a book right now that has to do with marketing, for example.
Hmm.
And like this book alone is going to make me over $2-3 million. By this one book, and
Wow.
what it's teaching me to do in this book, based on my business, is going to make me a few $1,000,000. And if I hadn't read this book, I wouldn't even have the thoughts or ideas or concepts.
Right.
So reading is powerful, man. I know there are people out here that are struggling with reading.
Hmm.
I'm not an audiobook fan personally.
Right.
Um, a quick hack is if and this is studies have proven this, if you listen to an audiobook and simultaneously read it, it also increases your likelihood to retain the information. I can't remember what percentage, but by quite a bit.
Yeah.
But a simple practice that I want to give people is start by reading 10 pages a day. You start by reading 10 pages a day every 10 days. That's 100 pages.
Hmm.
Um, within really a month, most books you can read 1 or 2 books in a month,
Yeah.
literally just by doing 10 pages a day. And that's a really great starting point for people to use.
That's what's up. That's what's up, man. A lot of people appreciate that tip.
No
But
doubt.
thanks. Thanks for popping on the podcast today, man. You shared a wealth of information. This is like the longest episode I probably recorded,
No doubt. No.
thus far. So
Hey, happy
it's
to do it,
packed.
man. And blessed too, man. I love seeing what you're doing. I've seen you doing a lot of stuff over the years.
Yes, sir.
We've been friends on Facebook and whatnot. We've
Hmm.
we've tapped in a couple of times over the years.
Yeah.
So I want to salute you as well, man, for everything that you're
Well,
doing. How you're
appreciate you, man.
you're being impactful, reaching back,
Yeah.
and using your voice, man. We all have one. We all got to empower ourselves to use it. So big salute to you for that, for sure, man.
Yeah. You know, the one thing I was talking to somebody recently, there's several people who we all work together that are now pursuing entrepreneurship.
Oh, that's
You know,
dope. Yeah. I see Juan doing his thing.
Juan, Keisha,
Yeah.
a few other folks. You know, who else is over there? You know, I know Sierra is doing some things. So it's several people.
That's
involved
real.
from that Santa Claus Center. It's like that salt and pepper kid and play type thing.
Exactly.
Right? You know,
Exactly.
So yeah. But again, man, thanks a lot, man. You know, we're gonna talk to you soon. And again, man, you know, love what you're doing and keep on doing your thing.
All right, bless, brother. I appreciate you, man.
Peace, what's going on? Have you ever wanted to get involved in real estate wholesaling, but just didn't know how? Well, my good friend Chris Jefferson has a whole course that he offers that teaches you all the ins and outs of real estate wholesaling. Look below in the show notes, you'll see a link that you can click on where you can get more information about the course in which he offers. Show you how to get started in real estate wholesaling, you know, how to get leads, how to promote yourself online. So definitely look below in the show notes, click on the link, get more information, and learn how to build your business. All right? Take care. Peace.
Generational wealth.